So the playoffs have been full of a lot of interesting things. You got the Miami Heat in the conference finals, the Bucks losing to them in 5, and then you also have the Toronto Raptors and Celtics, who have had an amazing playoff series that is coming down to the wire later today as I am recording this video. But those are not the topics that we are going to talk about. As you guys can tell from the title, we're going to talk about the Houston Rockets going down 3-1 to the Los Angeles Lakers and why they are in serious trouble. And when I say that, I don't think a lot of people understand how much trouble this team is currently in right now, because financially the money that they've committed to James Harden and Russell Westbrook is a good amount of money, as they're both on max contracts. And if that's the case, then this is what they're going to have to work with moving forward unless they want to trade one of the two. But I don't want to get into that because that's a whole nother topic in itself. But before we get started with this video, I would like to give a shout out to the sponsor, Stadium Live. Stadium Live is quickly becoming one of my favorite apps to use on a daily basis because it's very simple. It's kind of like an NBA Twitter sphere. You can talk about basketball, football, talk about a whole bunch of sports, but me, obviously basketball being my favorite sport. You can follow certain athletes and their profiles and all of that. It's pretty cool. You know, you have fan bases. There's a very active community. They also have some avatar building as you can create kind of your own little character and everything. They have some live team daily fantasies. There are trivias with voting polls and also some brackets, as well as some virtual shopping centers for your avatar, because you're gonna need some clothes. You don't want to look like a bum, you know what I'm saying? Just bought some J's just the other day. And if you want a head start with your coins, you can click the referral code in the description box with the code YoungMustard and you will get 1,000 coins instantly. But without further ado, let's get back to the video. When you look at this series as a whole, James Harden has played fairly well. He's averaged 29 points on 47% from the field and 41% from behind the arc, along with 8 assists and 4 rebounds as well. He's had a pretty solid series when you look at the box score, and I think that no matter what kind of defense you put on Harden, he's always going to be able to put up his numbers regardless of any type of efficiency, because that's just how prolific of a scorer that he is. But the problem that a lot of people have had with Harden over the course of his entire career, it seems like, is the fact that he disappears in the biggest of moments. And a lot of people used Game 4 as a reason to pull back that narrative and push it back into people's faces. As Harden in Game 4, in a game that put them down 3-1, you'd expect him to step up, but he recorded 21 points and 10 assists, which is really solid, but he shot 2 of 11 from the field at 18% and also shot 16% from behind the arc, 1 of 6 shooting to be exact. And for those wondering how he got to 21 points while only making 2 shots from the field, well, you can credit that to his 16 of 20 shooting from the free throw line. Yes, this guy had 20 free throw attempts. He literally had 1 less free throw attempt than he had points. And this goes back to what I've said about Harden from the very beginning. His game just doesn't translate well in the playoffs. Don't get me wrong, he's still putting up his numbers over the course of a series, but he'll have moments like this in which his efficiency will take such a dramatic drop off that the players around him now have a bigger responsibility and load on them to have to carry the team on the offensive side of the ball. And I'm not saying that Harden isn't still creating shots for others, he isn't rebounding. We all know that Harden's impact on the game is much more than his scoring, because though his scoring ability is his #1 attribute, it's not the only thing in his arsenal. And even when he's not scoring, the attention that the defense gives him definitely opens up shots for other players on his team. So I'm not saying that Harden, even when he's inefficient, has no impact on the game. Don't mistake what I'm saying here. But why do you think that his numbers see just a little bit of a drop off, especially in his efficiency in the playoffs? It's because you can't run that same play style every single night, especially in the playoffs, because it's different when you're in the regular season and some nights you're playing the Charlotte Hornets or the Phoenix Suns, but when you're in the playoffs, you're facing elite teams, and he's in the Western Conference for that matter, so you know he ain't facing no scrubs. They just went to 7 with the 5th seeded Oklahoma City Thunder just not too long ago. So if that's the case, you can't be running the same things in the regular season and expect it to work the exact same way in the postseason, especially when you consider you're not facing them 1 or 2 games. You have to beat them at least 4 times, and you potentially could see them 7 straight games. So if that's the case, you have to be able to present different ways that you're going to attack the defense, or else they're just going to game plan to stop what you're able to do and force you to have to adapt on the fly. But that's where Mike D'Antoni comes in, because as a coach, you should be able to either put your foot down and tell James we're going to run a different play style, or just be able to make adjustments. And it seems like he is unable or just straight up unwilling to do that. And at this point, Mike D'Antoni might need to get fired, because as I said earlier, James Harden and Russell Westbrook, you're stuck with them unless you actually want to trade them. And for players that are top 5 in James Harden's case, and in the case of Russell Westbrook, a top 15 player in the NBA, that's easier said than done, because you know you're not going to get equal compensation for that player. And to even make matters worse, it's never a guarantee to be able to have 2 players of their caliber on your roster at the same time. So when you think about it like that, maybe the change that needs to be made is at the head coaching position and getting rid of Mike D'Antoni, because he's had time to be able to get the job done. Let's not forget their loss against the Spurs in Game 6 without Kawhi Leonard in 2017, or the fact that they missed 27 straight threes against the Warriors in the Western Conference Finals that they still had a chance to win even in the 4th quarter, and they still kept doing the exact same thing over and over. No adjustments whatsoever. And then the next year we saw him run the exact same thing back, and they lost in even more embarrassing fashion, as Kevin Durant was out for the end of Game 5 that they lost, and for Game 6, which they lost in even more embarrassing fashion. So if that's the case, then I guess Mike D'Antoni might need to be moved out of Houston, because Houston is in a scenario where Russell Westbrook is not going to get any younger. And with the West getting tougher with the influx of talent every single year, the window that the Rockets have to win an NBA championship, or at least make the finals in the James Harden era, is starting to close. But I know some of y'all are probably wondering why I have not said anything about Russell Westbrook yet. Well, it's because I really just don't care. When it comes to Russ, y'all know my feelings about him. I'm not a hater or anything, but I just spit facts about Russell Westbrook. He's an MVP, he averaged a triple-double for 3 straight years, and he's one of the greatest point guards, scratch that, one of the greatest players that the league has ever seen. I put him in my top 50 players of all time. Trust me, Russell Westbrook is well respected as an all-time great in my book. But anything other than that, I'm sorry, you're just never going to get it out of me. He's not a great playoff performer. We saw what he did against Utah. We saw what he did against the Portland Trail Blazers. And we're seeing what's happening right now with the Houston Rockets. And sure, his box score numbers aren't trash, as he's averaging 22, 8, and 5 on 44% shooting from the field, but he's also shooting 29% from 3. And he's also shooting 60% from the free throw line. And he also has 19 assists in the series. And guess what? He has 18 turnovers as well, which correlates to nearly 5 turnovers a game throughout the entire series. And I know a lot of you guys are saying that Russ isn't playing that bad. Sure, he's not shooting well from behind the arc, and his free throws are a little off, and he's turning it over a little bit, but he's not playing completely trash, is he? Well, I would say yeah, he's not playing trash, but he should be playing better, because we all saw what the Rockets were able to accomplish in the post-Clint Capella trade, as many thought that this was the best version of Russell Westbrook that we have ever seen. Because sure, he wasn't putting up his triple doubles and his turnovers were still abnormally high, but considering the fact that he was an efficient scorer that wasn't putting up bad shots from behind the arc, this was something that was a huge improvement in Russell Westbrook's game that took it to an entire new level. But in the playoffs, with the Lakers sagging off on him, he'll have to pull up from 3, but he doesn't have to turn the ball over at a ridiculous rate. There are times where I see Russell Westbrook come down the court, even in this Lakers series, and I just know he doesn't know what the fuck he's going to do. And what does he do? He'll either turn it over or throw up some bad shot. And I don't think people understand that the Rockets need Russell Westbrook to be an efficient attacker of the basket, and for him to be efficient in the mid-range game as well, because due to their one-dimensional offense of shooting a whole bunch of threes, they're very predictable. And when Russ got there, it was essentially an inside and out game once they traded Capella. He would attack the basket and then kick it out to shooters like Eric Gordon, Daniel House, who by the way needs to keep his dick in his pants because it looks like it's cost him this series. And then you throw PJ Tucker in them corners. Man, the Rockets got some shooters around Russell Westbrook. So they need Russ to produce because he's what makes their offense different. He can throw defenses off balance with his style of play, but unfortunately he just can't get the job done right now, once again in the playoffs. And when you have one of the greatest scorers in NBA history, and some would argue the greatest scorer in James Harden on your team, yeah, it makes no sense for you to be taking more shots than that guy. But you know what's crazy though? That sounds eerily similar to another scenario that Russell Westbrook was in the past, but I just can't remember that guy's name, man. People were saying that he couldn't play with Russ, and now I guess Harden can't play with him. But that concludes this video, y'all. The Rockets are in legit trouble. I don't expect them to come back. Lakers in 6.